let's clear up courts. Federal judge reinstates Kentucky's gender-affirming care ban. Kentucky's ban on gender-affirming care for young transgender people was restored Friday when a federal judge lifted an injunction he issued last month that had temporarily blocked the restrictions. The latest ruling by U.S. District Judge David Hale means the Kentucky prohibition goes into effect, preventing transgender minors from accessing puberty blockers and hormone therapy. Kentucky Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who had asked that the injunction be lifted, applauded the ruling, while transgender rights advocates denounced it. Chris Hartman, executive director of the Fairness Campaign, warned that the statewide ban would immediately harm young transgender people and their families in Kentucky. Hale's reversal of his own order came nearly a week after the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, say that 4 times, overturned a similar temporary injunction halting the enforcement of a similar law in Tennessee. Corey Shapiro, legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Kentucky, said that the latest ruling is not the final word on the matter. The group called it a temporary setback and expressed confidence in achieving a positive result before another federal court. What's really alarming to me is that these laws and such are going into effect, these bans and such, because as everyone that takes place, the people who are enacting them feel more empowered to do more. That's what I find alarming and upsetting and terrifying.
Orlando, I want to call your expertise into play here. I know you've played quarterback for a long, long time over issues like this. Watch court moves, political moves in state and county legislature, city commissions, etc. When you see an injunction go into place and then another court reverse the injunction and the continued process, is that alarming to you, or how should we view it in terms of how the process through the courts work?
Right. So the comment from the attorney over at the ACLU, Shapiro, said that this is not the end, right? So that is in Tennessee. If we look at what's happening in Florida, there's an injunction actually in the law here in Florida as well. So there's been an injunction that's been placed on the law that was passed here. And so we're also sort of at this place where we're still litigating what's happening. And so there's a lot to see in terms of some of these injunctions that are taking place that are temporary and then being reversed, and then others that are coming into play. So all the states are doing a patchwork of litigating all of this. What's going to happen is that this is going to continue to go up the courts, and we're going to see it possibly up in the Supreme Court. It's going to continue to go up to a level.
Is this a normal process for average viewer listening to what's going on? Is this the way it works, or is this unusual from your seat?
I think that what's unusual is the patchwork. Right? I think that oftentimes we see sort of a lot of unanimity in terms of decisions that are being made, but I think that we're living in a moment in which we are not speaking as one American voice anymore, right? We're having a lot of differences taking place, a lot of contention taking place, a lot of very geographically specific voices coming up, and eventually it's going to come up to the highest court.
And does that mean conservative judges, more progressive judges, they're coming in different ways, and that's the patchwork you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the states.
And the states.
The states' laws.
Of course. That's right. California, very different than Kentucky in this instance. What's your expectation? I know it's asking you to have a crystal ball, but watching this patchwork, like in this issue of trans, the drag bans, perhaps don't say gay, those 3 big areas, what do you project is going to happen in terms of how courts are going to continue to move, and to other federal courts, like what the ACLU was talking about?
I'll go on my soapbox, right, which is what I say all the time, and that is that elections matter, and the long shadow that Donald Trump has cast, mostly, not in just our culture wars, but in the courts, is real. And many of these judges are in their positions for their whole entire lifetime. Right? And so the impact that has on our system, on our entire system of lawmaking, on our entire system of fairness for people, this is where the longest shadow is being cast. And so it's going to take a while, I think, before we undo a lot of the harm.
And I'm sorry.
So, and then, which to the point that Biden has appointed more judges than any president to date, thankfully.
Right.
So don't you think we might see some shift but it's going to be a while. Like you say,
gonna
it's
be
a
while.
long term. Yeah,
We're having to live out the life terms of many
yeah,
of
yeah.
these
And
judges.
some, they're very young.
Before we move on, one last thing I want to take the opportunity of your expertise, of your eye on. So while this was happening, we hear you loud and clear, voting matters and the results of Donald Trump being president. Do you think we were as aware while Trump was president for those 4 years of what was really going to dramatically affect us? Were we as aware that the court appointment of the judge appointment process was so critically important that we would see this years after Donald Trump being out of office?
I think we weren't aware. I think that people have been ringing the alarm bells and many people weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
Right? I always sort of say this thing, which is that during the Obama years, it's like we were high on the romance, right? Like we really took our foot off the pedal, we took our hands off the wheel, but we lived in really great times during that 8-year period. And so as a result, I think that while there were still warnings being said, we have to continue to be vigilant, apply pressure, and think about future elections, it's because of the judgeships. And that's where the big prize is being held. And in the meantime, while we were happy, right, and celebrating, the conservatives were creating a plan for the judicial.
And Supreme Court too, specifically.
Absolutely.
That's been their goal for many decades.
Yeah. That's an interesting metaphor that I'm going to remember. We were high through the Obama years, and now we need to get high to get through the Trump years. I hear you.
It's funny because I actually was high during the Obama years and then got sober for Trump. So,
we hear our
That's sobering.
activists at the table say elections matter. We hear it in another and many different ways. All right. We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out Television Network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ+ community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.